The Taliban and their supporters filled the streets of Kabul, waving their flag and riding trucks. Except for these vendors selling some of those flags, there are hardly any women in sight. Afghanistan's rulers celebrate the 5th anniversary of their return to power here at the Loya Jirga Assembly Hall. They spoke about bringing stability and an end to conflict after decades of upheaval. And once again, there are no women present. The Taliban seized power on August 15, 2021. They took the capital unopposed after a lightning offensive that swept across Afghanistan. US and other NATO troops withdrew, and the Western-backed government's military collapsed. This was followed by scenes of chaos at Kabul airport, as crowds tried to flee the country in desperation. Since then, the Taliban has imposed their interpretation of Islamic law, which denies women and girls basic rights. Women have been banned from public spaces, and girls over the age of 12 can no longer go to school. UNESCO says some 2.4 million girls have been excluded from secondary education. And according to data from UN Women, half of Afghan women now leave their homes only once or twice a month.
The gates of high schools remain locked to girls. The halls of universities remain open to men only. And a growing shortage of women health workers, a consequence of the education bans, is making it harder for women to receive health care, particularly in communities where custom prevents women from being treated by male doctors. In the face of all these extraordinary restrictions, I hear the message over and over from the Afghan women I meet: see us, don't leave us, stand with us and continue to support us.
Afghanistan under the Taliban faces one of the world's most pressing humanitarian crises. International aid cuts have made matters worse. The Taliban government remains internationally isolated, with Russia being the only country to have recognized it. The group, once designated a terrorist organization by dozens of countries, is now seeking greater diplomatic engagement.
Look, I think it's almost impossible to engage with the Taliban on human rights issues. We have not seen any positive progress. We've only seen things deteriorate to a worse and worse situation. So it's really important that governments fund humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan. It's really important that this reaches Afghan people.
Some countries have limited their relations with the Taliban authorities to press for changes. But they are now forced to weigh the urgency of assistance to Afghans against a normalization of Taliban's policies.
Ashley Jackson is the co-founder of the Center on Armed Groups. That's a think tank. She has spent years studying the Taliban and life under armed extremist rule in Afghanistan. I asked her what the biggest misconception is that people still have about Afghanistan today.
How incredibly diverse it is. I think there are a number of people really struggling to continue to survive, to keep their businesses, their NGOs, their newspapers going under the Taliban regime, and working with whatever's there and whoever is there to try and keep those things going, whether it's a girls' school, whether it's a media outlet, whether it's a small business. We can't just blur them all into one homogenous population, and they still need our support.
Now, the Taliban, of course, would claim that they've established much greater security, but critics point to the systematic exclusion of women and girls from public life. To what extent has the Taliban changed Afghanistan over these 5 years of their rule?
You're right. That's one of the major changes. The restrictions that they've put in place, especially the restrictions on female education from primary school up, have had a remarkable and very negative impact on Afghan lives and on Afghanistan. But not all Taliban actually even agree with those restrictions. Some have opened up madrasas for young women so that they can continue to study. There are some, even in the Taliban, who recognize that Afghanistan needs women. It needs female doctors, it needs female teachers, it needs women educated. So it's not as one-dimensional as people portray it to be. There's a real struggle inside Afghan society and within the Taliban over women's rights.
Do you see those that you just described who agree that girls need better education than they're getting right now. Do you see any chance that that will become sort of a majority opinion inside the Taliban?
Potentially. It's a generational thing. You know, the Taliban is a repressive dictatorship. There is an emir in Kandahar who sets the rules, and he set this very one painful, consequential rule on girls not being able to access education. But what we've seen in the past few years in particular is that women, as well as men, as well as members of the Taliban, are finding workarounds. They're finding ways to resist, finding ways for women to continue to work, not only in the private sector, but in government ministries, to continue to get an education. So I think part of what we need to consider is that there are still people inside the country fighting and finding ways around these restrictions. And you can't keep Afghan women down forever. They've been educated, they've suffered through the wars, and they aren't giving up, which I think is one of the more encouraging things about Afghanistan right now.
Now that leads directly to my next question about what the international community should do. The international community has spent years trying to pressure the Taliban over women's rights. Has that strategy achieved anything, or has the world essentially run out of leverage here?
I think by pressuring the Taliban publicly, it's backfired. It's actually made things worse. The West did not have much leverage with the Taliban to begin with. It had waged a 20-year war against the Taliban. So when they took over, they weren't particularly disposed to listening to what the West had to say. So I think we have to recognize that we have no leverage with the Taliban. But what we do have is an ability to support the Afghan people. There's still women running NGOs, running schools. There are people inside Afghanistan who, have always been there, fighting for social change, fighting for a strong, independent, self-reliant Afghanistan. And those are the people we can work with. I think we've frankly spent too much time focusing on trying to change the Taliban rather than trying to support Afghans to work around these restrictions, to resist them, and to survive them, quite frankly.
Now, Russia has formally recognized the Taliban, while a number of regional powers also have deepened ties with Kabul. What's driving that engagement?
Pragmatism. I think you've also left out the fact that many European countries have established de facto kind of Taliban offices inside their countries to facilitate the deportation of Afghan migrants. Even though that's not outright recognition, it's a practicality. The Taliban government has control of Afghanistan. There is no significant armed opposition at present inside the country. It is stable for the most part, and it is, again, the government. So if we want to help Afghans, if we want to deport them, if we want to do anything in the world, I think we really have to kind of recognize that after 5 years, the Taliban is not going anywhere.
Ashley Jackson there, co-founder of the Centre on Armed Groups. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.